We are delighted today to kick off the first episode of my new podcast, Not Another Podcast. We're joined with Sean Jarvis. He's spent years working in football, rugby, and cricket. Notably, on my personal experience, I've worked with him at Leicestershire Cricket Club. First of all, I want to start, which you briefly mentioned before we started. How did you get into sport?
Jack, it's first and foremost, it's lovely to see you again, and thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. Yeah, I grew up in Leicester, always obsessed with sport, and Leicester is a very sporting city. You know, football, rugby, cricket, speedway. And there's lots more. I mean, they've got basketball now, and so growing up, I always was obsessed with sport, and I loved playing for the school team, and that was something that really motivated me, and that never went away, even through my whole career when I played amateur football and a bit of amateur cricket. I was just so passionate about it. And then I went away, studied in Yorkshire, Leeds University. Finished there, and then I spent best part of, I would say, 10 years in advertising in the sort of late 80s, which was a real boom time around then, where advertising was a big thing. It was a lot of red braces. If you do Google stuff, it's all about red braces, big mobile phones, and it was great fun. And Leeds was regarded as one of the major centres of the advertising industry, and I loved it, and it was great fun. But over that 10 years, I found myself gravitating towards sport, really, and having sport clients. And I did a bit of work for the Premier League. I did a bit of work for the RFL in that time, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. And that was the point, I think. After 10 years of working, having great times in advertising, I thought to myself, what is it I really want to do? I've done my apprenticeship, if you like, and now it's time to focus on something. So sport was my thing, and I wrote to all sorts of clubs and industry governing bodies. And eventually, I got a lucky break. Oldham Athletic interviewed me. I actually had two job offers at the time. One was for the Halifax Building Society, and the other one was Oldham Athletic. And I remember phoning my wife and sort of saying, what should I do? The Halifax Building Society one were willing to pay me quite considerable amount of money, really, having spent 10 years in the advertising industry, I think, as their marketing manager. But I was passionate about sport. So my wife sort of said, follow your heart. And that was it. So I went and worked. I got a job offer at Oldham Athletic, accepted that. And that was it, really. That's how it kind of began. I do often wonder if I had not chosen the football route of Oldham Athletic, maybe I'd be a billionaire now. I'd be working for one of the big banks in New York or something. Who knows? But I have to say, my career, I've loved it. I've had a great time. Some real highs, some real lows. But yeah, I'm eternally grateful to Oldham Athletic for giving me that break, really, and working for them.
Yeah, with Oldham Athletic, obviously, I know a little bit about them. They had some financial difficulties. How did you manage those challenges?
Yeah, it was a real interesting period, actually, because Oldham Athletic had quite a bit of history. They'd been in the Premier League. It was before my time was there. That they were regarded as a good community club, but had been, since the Premier League days, had been on a gradual decline. And I was brought in as marketing manager back then, and my brief was very much sort of build relationships with the community, try and boost crowds, increase commercial revenues, all those sorts of things. So I spent 7 years at Oldham Athletic, and we did a good job. We sort of maintained our status in League One as it is now. We had a couple of flirtations with the playoffs, but what happened? It was run as a very tight ship by the chairman at the time and the local community, and they were local business people that were very passionate Oldham Athletic fans, but ran it, as I say, as a very tight ship, which was great. But then one day they decided we want to sell the club. So they sold it to quite a wealthy individual from Stockport who had an IT business. And he came in, and he was a wealthy lad, and he invested a lot of money into the club. He bought some tremendous players. You're probably too young to remember them, but people like Fitz Hall, Clint Hill, Chris Armstrong, who went to Sheffield United. Some very, very good footballers, and they were progressing nicely. And then what happened? The owner, a guy called Chris Moore, then had a number of circumstances that changed his whole outlook on what he wanted to do, and he decided to effectively pull out of the football club, which meant he wasn't bankrolling the club at that point. And at that point, it was sort of £6 million in debt. The board that he had appointed were all his friends, and they kind of disappeared. And all the staff at Oldham Athletic had been there 30, 40 years. But they looked to me at that time, they turned around to me, and I was quite new, fresh, sort of brought a lot of energy. They sort of looked to me to try and get us out of this situation. So I searched high and low for somebody to buy the football club, but nobody really came forward at that time. So, and the time was marching on, the season was approaching, and we were 6 million in debt. And of course, I didn't have those kind of finances behind me. So eventually I had to own the club, I had to buy the club for £1, and the objective was to then diminish the 6 million debt. Now, the way you did that was by what's called a corporate voluntary arrangement. So effectively, all the creditors in and around Oldham, including the taxman at the time, we had to negotiate with them a level of pence in the pound to give them back. Anyway, cut a long story short, we managed to secure that. We effectively got the debts down from 6 million to 2 million. So I ended up owning a football club along with the accountant, which we bought for £1, and we got it down to 2 million. But we were running it on a shoestring, really, just keeping the club alive. And at the time, I was then continuing to search for people who might want to buy the club. And we managed to find 3 English lads who lived in New York, who'd, I think, previously tried to buy Hull City, but failed. Anyway, they came to the party, and they bought Oldham Athletic. Now, at that time, then I worked for them for a couple of years, and that was fine. I ran my course, if you like, at Oldham Athletic. They were great guys that kept the club alive. And then I moved on to Huddersfield Town, which I'm sure we might talk about. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people describe me as the saviour of Oldham Athletic back in the day. And I'll be honest, I just did what I had to do to keep that club alive. And I shall never forget sitting in the stands one day, and there was a lady there. She was an old lady, and she just said to me, "Just keep my club alive." And it was things like that motivated me to keep it going and do what I do. And do you know what? I'm absolutely delighted now. They've got a guy called Frank Rothwell in charge, and the Royal family, Joe Royal, Darren Royal, are heavily involved. And I'm really pleased for them. They're on the way up. I'm delighted they've got out of the conference and now back into the Football League. And I think in a year or two, once they've settled down a little bit, they'll probably progress, and I think there's no doubt they could be a championship side again. Once you get into the championship, as we know with Huddersfield Town, anything can happen. So you just never know. But I'm delighted they're back. They're back on the map and doing well. And I'm actually going to see them in Christmas to watch a game over there. So I'm looking forward to catching up with Darren Royal.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, it's good to see because with the smaller teams now, like Morecambe, for example, with football teams like that, good football clubs with really great history, and people just can't spend the money. And unfortunately, clubs just just can't do it anymore. But it's really good, successful, and it's gone really well. And it's back to like
it's incredibly difficult for teams like Morecambe. And there's some that have failed as well, like Bury. We all know the Bury story, but teams like Oldham, Morecambe, all those clubs in those divisions without rich benefactors, it's incredibly challenging. So they, a bit like cricket, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but they've got to create ways in which they can generate income for themselves, and whether that's through the grounds, how they do it with the grounds, whether that's through being creative. I noticed Oldham Athletic the other day in one of their bars, they'd got the Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. fight on in the bar. So they're encouraging people to go and spend money in, and I think this is the future of stadiums, of clubs like that, where they've got to be community hubs where people go and almost spend a bit of leisure time down there. So because you can't survive on 26 home matches a season, it's nigh impossible. So they have to think outside the box to generate income to compete and stay alive.
Yeah, definitely. It's just mental, the disparity between the Premier League teams, like the top teams, like the Manchester Cities and Newcastles, having all that wealth, and all the bottom teams and the smaller teams just are struggling. And it's a shame, because I personally, I much prefer going to non-league games. My local football team at the moment is Kidderminster Harriers, and
yeah,
it's a lot more of a community than watching football. I love watching Premier League football, but you don't really have the same character, the same feel. You don't vibe when you go to watch the football.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I recently went to watch Emley Football Club, and I have to say I was incredibly impressed by how they'd managed the match day experience and hospitality and the bar and everything associated with the ground, the stewarding, and so I was really impressed with them. I mean, it's very similar throughout all divisions. It's just bigger numbers at Premier League, and the Premier League is awash with cash. I mean, it's a tremendous export for the UK, and I was fortunate enough to spend a couple of years with Huddersfield Town in the Premier League, and it's a fascinating thing. I mean, I'll give you a little bit of info that I picked up when I was at Huddersfield and we got into the Premier League. When you're in the Premier League, you could easily sell tickets to people that travel from Ireland or even further afield. We even had people from the States fly over to watch Huddersfield Town and some of their games. And what happens is, if you get somebody from, let's for argument's sake, let's say Scandinavia, that comes over and watches a game, chances are, and this was a bit of research that was done, I think, by Visit Britain, was that they would spend at one of those matches anything from £300 to £500, maybe even more now, £300 to £500 per game. Whereas if it's a local individual that it lives in, say, Huddersfield, that goes to the game, chances are they're going to spend £50, maybe a shirt, maybe a program. So you can sort of see a lot of strategy behind maybe some of the Premier League clubs, the bigger Premier League clubs, say, right, well, we're not going to sell all our season tickets to our local community because we're going to attract overseas people that will come and watch us. So I think when you go to places like Old Trafford, Man City, Liverpool, sometimes their atmospheres can be a little bit sterile. And I think that's because of these people that come to watch the games. It's very new to them, they're experiencing it. So whereas when we were at Huddersfield Town, we focused on our local community, and our atmosphere was outstanding. But maybe we lost out a little bit. Maybe we didn't get the strategy right, and maybe should have gone for chasing the dollar. But so sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. But it's an interesting fact of how much an overseas person would spend versus an individual who comes from home, really.
It is because obviously when Huddersfield was in the Premier League, it was a great force, a club which hasn't been in the first division for a while, and then just trying to catch the balance between community, like you were doing at Oldham, but also trying to reach the revenue, Premier League, like the parachute payments and all the TV money now in football.
Yeah, I think Huddersfield was a great example of where we booked the trend. We our stars aligned, and there's a lot of luck in what we did. But I learnt an awful lot from my time at Huddersfield and my former chairman Dean Hoyle about what good looks like, and I took a lot of that into Leicestershire, and of course, being 5 years at Leicestershire, we won a couple of trophies, and that's not just by luck, that is by hard work. But the Premier League is an astronomical business, and like I say, I was fortunate to spend 2 years in that league and learnt an awful lot. And we saw at Huddersfield, we began to see the shoots of supporter groups from around the world popping up. We had quite a few Germans that were playing for us. We had some Danish players, Australian. Football at that time was quite big in the States, British football. So you saw these little pockets around the world of supporter groups starting to evolve. And I think the longer you stay in the Premier League, the bigger your global business becomes. And we had the pleasure of staying in it 2 years, and I think to myself, if we'd stayed there maybe 4 or 5 years, there is no doubt those commercial revenues would have grown from around the world. We visited China, and there was a lot of interest in us from China. So I think the thing about the Premier League is that it is a global business, and it does attract audiences from around the world. I mean, we beat Manchester United 2-1, and I was fortunate enough to go on holiday shortly after, and I went to Dubai for a week with my family, and everybody was talking about Huddersfield Town. They didn't know who I was, but they're all talking about Huddersfield Town in Dubai because we beat Manchester United. So there's things like that then create opportunities, and it's how you maximise those opportunities, I think.
Yeah, because look at like the teams like Brentford, who I think Huddersfield are personally, in my opinion, a bigger side than Brentford, and look how well they're doing now. A stable Premier League team who there's not. I personally this season I don't think there's any chance of them getting relegated this season. I think they're playing well, quite good football. So it's just trying to get into a good position, stay in the Premier League, and then, like you said, reap rewards from it. Like one of my questions was just going to say, what was the biggest milestone at Huddersfield? But obviously, getting to the Premier League was probably the biggest milestone, wasn't it?
Yeah, without question. I mean, when we kind of inherited Huddersfield. It had lost its connection to its community. I mean, the heritage of Huddersfield Town is, if you look back, is actually quite phenomenal. In the 20s, it was arguably the biggest club in the UK. It was the first club to win the title 3 times in a row, and had some unbelievable footballers and managers, including the great late Bill Shankly, Dennis Law, and so the heritage of the football club is tremendous. But I think for us, when we were in there, as I say, it lost its connection to its community, its fan base. So over a period of time, we wanted to improve that. Of course, it was about improving on the field as well, and trying to get the right manager, the right players, and I think the one thing that we did was every year we learned, whether that was on the field or off the field, you kind of learn how to get better. And this is one of the things I think is dangerous about football clubs or sports clubs, is that they tend to repeat the same year, and it kind of it's do the same thing, and I think that's a dangerous strategy. What we did at Huddersfield was, okay, we'll learn by our mistakes, evolve a little bit, develop, and let's see how. And don't be afraid to make some big calls to change the way we go about it. And of course, you need a bit of luck. You need you need that sprinkling of magic on what you do, and I think, as I sort of said, once the stars align, then the magic can happen. But behind the scenes, there is without question processes, structures, how you perform day in, day out, to get better, and that's what we did. That's what we did at Huddersfield. It was about each season, right, reflecting what have we done, how have we performed, what have we got right, how can we get better, and that was the culture. And that's a big word, and we might come to that 2 or 3 times. But the word culture, creating that culture, was so important that gave us, I guess, the launch pad to be successful. And getting to the Premier League was without question, absolutely massive for Huddersfield Town Football Club and its community as well. So, it was a very special occasion for all of us, really. Just a shame that we couldn't survive that long enough. And I think that's the challenge for clubs like Huddersfield, Barnsley, Blackpool, Luton, that have all been there. The clubs like Burnley have done a great job. Brentford, great job. Bournemouth, a great job. So there's definitely learnings you can do. But I'd done 15 years, and my time had come to an end at that point. But that was a terrific period of my life.
Yeah, perfect. Talking about where you went to next is Leicestershire Cricket Club in 2020. How how was it in COVID times? How did you deal with that? Because obviously there was a bit of a shutdown of all sport, really.
It was very bizarre, to say the least. I'd literally joined Leicestershire as chief exec, and within 2 days, I had to send everybody home, including all the staff and the players. So I'd only been there 48 hours, and I said to everybody, right, you're all going home, and you're staying at home until I tell you otherwise. So I was very popular within 48 hours, so that was a good thing. But Leicester at that time was the epicenter in the UK for COVID, and I had a very big argument with the Lancashire County Cricket Club at one point, which I'll come back to. But it was a real challenge. It was a real challenge of a period that lasted 2.5 years, really. But a credit to the ECB. The ECB, I think, at the prior year had the one-day World Cup. They had the Ashes, so they had a very good war chest of cash that could then be disseminated to all the first-class counties and recreational cricket. So the ECB and Cricket PLC, if you like, was in a good position to stay alive, where somebody like Rugby League had to go cap in hand to the government to get handouts, and football clubs were reliant on their owners. So cricket was in a good position because it had got those reserves, I think, if you like. But for me, it was a really interesting period because it allowed me a bit of time to actually step back and reflect on, well, how has Leicestershire been run? What the strategies are in place? How's it working? Why have we been unsuccessful for the best part of 10 to 15 years? What are we doing wrong? Where have we gone wrong? And how do we put it right? And then there were daily challenges. I mentioned there Lancashire and Lancashire. So the fixtures come out, and we were all to be playing behind closed doors. And our first fixture was against Lancashire at Grace Road, at the Upton Steel County Ground. And Lancashire refused to come and play at Grace Road, and wanted us to move from Grace Road to I think it was New Road, Worcester New Road, but it would stay as a Leicestershire home fixture. So I was furious about this. Manchester United, interestingly, had played Leicester City and had no issues, but Lancashire and their chief exec were adamant that they were not coming to Leicestershire. So I was equally stubborn and said, no, you are coming to play, and you can't dictate where we play. It's not in your gift to give. So we had a lot of online conversations with the ECB, Lancashire, but as an old prime minister once said, this lady's not for turning. That's how I was. There was no way I was going to give in to Lancashire, because I knew the efforts that the people at Leicestershire had put in place to make sure everything was absolutely fine and nobody was at risk. But what happened in the end? The ECB acted as a mediator and said, we're gonna, because of Lancashire, we're gonna move you to New Road. And I sort of said there is no way it would be a home game then. It would have to be a Lancashire home game. And it ended up being described as a Lancashire home game. So I agreed for us to move, but it was on the premise that it was a Lancashire home game. What was equally nice was that we actually beat Lancashire in a 4-day game at New Road. So that was Leicestershire one, and that was my baptism of fire at cricket. But joking aside, I'd gone in there and to fight tooth and nail for Leicestershire, because I think in years gone by we'd been a bit of a doormat of a club, and I think we were regarded as you're the naughty boy at the back, you stay there, Leicestershire. But I was never ever gonna play the toe the company line on things like that. I was always going to fight tooth and nail. So COVID did give me a bit of breathing space to actually sort of sit down and reflect and look at how the club should be run. And cutting a long story short, I'm delighted with the way the 5-year plan has gone. We won the one-day cup. We got promoted to Division 1, and we've created 2 England players and probably a couple more coming through that could play for England in the future. So I once, very recently, I went to an event with Gareth Southgate at York, where he was talking about his career. And he used the phrase, he said, a good leader is somebody that inherits an organisation and leaves it in a better place when they decide to go. and for me, that's what I've done. You know, I was passionate about. I'm a Leicester lad, passionate about Leicestershire. I grew up supporting Leicestershire County Cricket Club. My dad was a big cricket man, so I was very emotive about it. But from where it was, which best described as a basket case, to where it is now, I think is a quantum leap. And I can look myself in the mirror and know that I've given it my all, and that club is in a far better position. And hopefully it goes on strength to strength. And you know what mustn't happen, and this is what happened in sport a lot, is egos can take over. Once egos take over, things start to go wrong. So you know, as I say, I hope I've left it in a good place, and I hope they can kick on.